Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing kind of a very casual chat about one series that I finished off last month, and that is the Empire of the Wolf trilogy by Richard Swan. The reason why I say this is going to be a bit more casual is I didn't actually plan my review for this. I just thought I would just keep it quite short because I think I've talked about this series enough on my channel now. And I just wanted to give you my updated thoughts now that I've finished the trilogy. There won't be any spoilers, so like I said, this is just going to be like an informal chat. I haven't really planned this video out like I normally do with my other ones. So with that in mind, let's just jump in. Let's just have fun with it. My overall thoughts on this series is, unfortunately, I think this is one of those series that really declined in quality, and I think part of the reason why it really declined in quality is because the direction that it went in was so different to where it started that it almost became a completely different series. I feel like where we started and where we ended up, they should have been two completely different series. One of the things that I really liked about this series in the first book particularly, and to some extent in the second book, was the politics in this world. There's a lot of politics in the first book and we get some exploration of that in the second book. But for some reason, it just seems to disappear later on in the series. And I think Richard Swan is actually very talented at writing politics. Unfortunately, he leans more into the sci-fi aspects of this series that get more introduced in book 2, that I don't think he's as good as writing it. Maybe he would be though, but it just, because he was mishmashing so many different things in this series that he couldn't give it enough attention. I don't know. But my point is that I think the thing that really made this series strong at the start completely dissipated by the end of it, and it really impacted the overall storytelling. Let me jump a little bit more onto the sci-fi stuff. So for anybody who has played Control, which is a video game on PlayStation, and I think it might be on other consoles as well, I don't really know to be honest. But it's a game that is very much a sci-fi game, and it's all about like astral planes, and it's all about like manipulating matter. And it's such a cool concept. Like, it's an incredible game. I finished it a few months back and I still think about it. Absolutely amazing stuff. And there's a lot of what is in that game reflected in the latter half of this series, and I think that would make an amazing sci-fi series, but I think it would need to be completely different. Like, it would need to be approached completely differently, and I think combining it with the fantasy elements and the political elements at the start of this series, it just didn't work. And like I said, I think it's partly because the author wasn't able to give attention to both things equally. Something had to be deprioritized, and I think the wrong thing was deprioritized. I'm seeing more and more authors like blend sci-fi and fantasy, and I haven't come across one author yet, apart from maybe James Islington in The Will of the Many, who has been able, and even then, could you really say there's sci-fi in that? I guess there is sci-fi aspects to it. I haven't seen an author really do it well, and I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I like this blending. I think there's certain authors that have tried to do it and they've done an okay job of it, but I don't know if I've ever really read anyone who's done an incredible job of it. And I don't think Richard Swan has the experience as well as an author to be able to take on that level of complexity in this series. Like, I think he probably could do a good job of it if it was a separate series, but again, combining the two, I just don't think it was a good creative decision, and it almost felt like we were reading two completely different books by the final book. The other thing I'm going to talk about is the characters. I really did not like Helena. She's so annoying. She's a wet blanket. She's got very little depth. I really liked her in the first book. I would say I really liked her. I quite liked her in the first book. Second book, okay, fine. Third book, absolutely unbearable. There is a trope that I absolutely detest that is often written by men. It's written by women too, but it's more often, I've noticed, written by men, and that is women hating women. I hate it. I don't like it. There's no place to have it. Come on. We're not in that like movie era of like high school comedies where, you know, you would see women being rude to other women, like Mean Girls. Like, we're not in that era anymore. Like, let's move on. Let's get over it. Like, no. As an example, one of our characters has a romantic interest and Helena gets very jealous, and it starts, that's fair enough. You can become jealous of somebody because they're taking attention from someone that you love and you care about. Fine. What I don't like is when it becomes quite insidious and it becomes like a part of their personality that every single time a new woman comes onto the block, apart from if she's like old, or unattractive, that she instantly becomes viewed as competition. It's a very cheap device to create conflict, and it's a very cheap device to create a character growth or potential character growth in the future, because, you know, they kind of come to terms with that and overcome it, right? I just didn't like it. I don't like Helena because of that. And I don't want a main character that I can't get behind. You know, she can be a horrible person, but I can still buy into that person. And I just didn't buy into it. I didn't buy into why she was like this. And I really did not like where it ended up going by the end of the series. Like I said, it felt really cheap, and I didn't feel any emotional connection to her because of that. Hey everyone, editing Zara here. I also wanted to mention that one of the red flags that I had as it related to Helena, and particularly Von Volt, is that the author himself has said that Von Volt is in his early 40s at the point that the first book starts. So that means that when he met Helena, who is about 20 in the first book, she would have been in her early teens. I personally find this to be very weird, because what is alluded to is that they had romantic feelings for each other quite early on when they first met. And that's very weird to me, because Helena would have been underage. Von Volt was also in a position of power. I would almost even go as far as to question whether Von Volt is a groomer, because the way their relationship develops is quite unhealthy, and I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that they perhaps had a very unhealthy relationship when she was a teenager, essentially a child still. The other thing that I thought deteriorated quite quickly by the end of the series is the pacing. I think book 1 was paced okay, and I think book 2 was paced okay too. I think book 3, the pacing of the different events that happened was so off and so weird. We were also introduced to like new things very quickly in the final book of the series, and it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense, and it just felt like there were things added to the end of it just to make, you know, make it feel a certain way. But what it made it feel like was very inauthentic, because like I said, we got mentions of things that we'd never had any mention of before, and then they would just come out of nowhere, and it didn't really add anything to the story. If anything, it made me feel very frustrated, because there's me thinking, where did this random thing come from, you know? So I feel like the series just didn't really have the depth that I think it should have had by the end of the book, because the things that we had been introduced earlier on were either abandoned by the end of the series, or we were introduced to new things at the end of the series that we didn't have enough time to get fully invested in. So it just felt very empty. Like, I feel very empty and like almost apathetic towards this series, because there's nothing that I can really latch onto that I really liked. Like maybe 1 or 2 characters. They're not particularly memorable characters that I'm going to think about like I do other characters like Logan from First Law or Nair from the Prince of Nothing trilogy. Like, those are characters that I genuinely think about quite a lot, but there are no characters in this series that I really think that I'm gonna think about at any point in the future, which is really upsetting, because I actually really liked Von Volt at the start. I didn't like his arc as well, and one of the things that we learn at the very start of the first book is that inevitably Von Volt is going to have a decline. That's not a spoiler, it's something that I think is even in the blurb. Like, we learn very quickly that Helena is telling the story retrospectively, and so we know everything she's telling us has already happened. And one of the things that she stresses is the fact that Von Volt starts out as this incredibly intelligent, very well-respected individual, and by the end of it, he's almost like a pariah. He's almost like an outcast. So we know he goes through a decline, but the decline that he goes through doesn't match up with what actually happens. It's not as bad as it's made out to be. You know, I kind of expected a more extraordinary decline, and we just didn't get it. Like, a really good example of seeing a character's decline is The Folding Knife by KJ Parker. You really see what causes his decline, and then we see where he ends up compared to where he was at the start, and you're like, shit, this guy really messed it up. In this one, yeah, he made a few poor decisions. I don't think they were decisions that warranted the outcome that he got, and I think the outcome that he got by the end of it wasn't even that bad. So it just felt like this whole premise of this trilogy was set up to be like really intense and like really like the decline of this person who was really well respected, and I just don't think we got that at all. So it just felt like it kind of delivered on false promises, to be honest, which is really unfortunate for me to say, because I really wanted to love this series and I really had high hopes for it. But when I think about it overall, and even the individual books, it just felt like empty promises that weren't really met. And when you couple that with, you know, lack of character depth and poor pacing and not particularly great world building either, it just fell really flat for me, unfortunately. This is one of those situations where I would really like to read whatever Richard Swan writes next, provided it's not set in this world. I don't care about this world. I don't want to read about anything in this world ever again. But I think he has talent, and I'm really excited to see what he writes next. And I really hope he does like a political fantasy series where it's like empires warring against each other, because I think he has talent and I think he can do that very well. A lot of the stuff around like the law and like the judicial system was really fascinating, which we get a lot of in book 1. We didn't really get any of that in book 2 and book 3, and I think that's his strength. From what I understand, he used to be a lawyer, or maybe he still is, but you know, he studied the law. And you can see that knowledge come through and really shine through in the first book. But again, we lose that in book 2 and 3, and it really leaves a lot to be desired. That was really unfortunate. And like I said, I'm not writing off this author. Like I said, I think they have talent. It's just unfortunately, I don't think this story was a good demonstration of their talent. So I really hope we get something a bit different next time. Would I say this is a series worth reading? Honestly, no, I don't think it is. I don't think it's worth the time, because I don't think the payoff is worth it. In fact, I think it's the complete antithesis of that. I read this trilogy with my Patreons. We did one book a month over a 3-month period, and we all had the exact same experience, with the ones who have finished it so far at least. And we all felt this sense of kind of like we'd wasted a bit of time, because it just didn't match up with what the expectation was set in book 1. Like, it was just a very odd experience, and I don't think any of us have ever really experienced that before. And I think we all came out of it feeling a bit jaded because it was so lackluster overall. It was really nice reading it with them though, and we're gonna be reading a duology next. And I love reading these sorts of kind of bigger worlds with others, because it's just nice to kind of see how other people perceive the world, and oftentimes that can be very similar but also very different. But I think in this scenario we all had a very similar experience, which was also quite validating. So I would say personally skip this one. I don't think it's worth it. I don't even think it's worth reading the first book, because it does end on a cliffhanger, and well, it's not the biggest cliffhanger, but even the first book, I don't think it's the most amazing book, but I thought it was a good start, and I thought it had the potential to set up a really interesting world, but unfortunately that wasn't delivered, and that's why I just don't think it's worth reading this series, unless the only way I would recommend this is if you like slightly chaotic storytelling, and I do think this book or series definitely has that. If you just want to like get completely thrown around and have like inconsistent storytelling, I mean, I would suggest potentially reading the first book, just because I think Von Volt is quite a compelling character, but then I wouldn't recommend definitely reading beyond that, because it's just not worth it. So there we have it. I hope that was all right. It was a bit more casual. I just wanted to kind of tell my thoughts on the overall series and whether I would recommend it. I think to a very specific subset of the fantasy reader population will enjoy it, but I think the majority of people will probably be quite frustrated by it, like myself and my patrons were too. So there we have it. Please do give this video a thumbs up. I do just want to say, like, this is nothing against the author. Like I said, I really want to read whatever he writes next beyond this world, and I really hope that we get to see him display his talent in a really cool like political series at some point in the future. Let me know down below in the comments what your experience was, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know down below, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you soon.